In the multiverse bending Spider-Man No Way Home, one Spider-Man variant gets his long-awaited redemption, but does the other one lose the love of his life?
I know you predicted I'd disappoint you.
Bingo.
Fans' blood went cold the minute Tobey Maguire's Peter said the two most dreaded words someone can say regarding his romance with MJ. It's complicated. Spider-Man fans everywhere first started rooting for these kooky kids back in 2002, and spent 3 films watching their will they or won't they romance play out on screen. After all of that teenage angst followed by an implied happy ending, this one-liner comes across as a slap in the face. Look, we get it, adult life is difficult enough when you're not a web-slinging superhero. Plus, the third film showed how tricky it is dating someone with a double identity. However, No Way Home doesn't really have the right to retcon one of the most iconic couples in superhero history.
I can't survive without you.
Additionally, the throwaway line doesn't add anything to the story and only confuses audiences. We also hear Peter talk about MJ, saying, "We made it work." Not only is the past tense of that sentiment confusing, it makes it unclear whether Peter and MJ are still going the distance. Basically, the moment cast a dark cloud over an otherwise epic cameo. Happy and Aunt May aren't exactly a couple written in the stars, and Happy's not a character who's always taken seriously, but he still deserves to be treated as more than a vehicle for comedy relief. It's pretty clear that Happy is a tad more invested in his non-relationship with May than she is, but No Way Home takes it to a whole other level. Peter comes home after his identity as Spider-Man is outed to have another awkward family sit-down. Happy and May's breakup tries to ease the tension of Peter's situation, but in hindsight, it's not very funny. Happy certainly needs to accept that they're not on the same page romantically. Still, May could break things off with Happy a bit more tactfully. May's death is one of the most devastating scenes in Tom Holland's trilogy, but her death also means that her savage breakup with Happy is the last memory he has of her. He never really gets the closure he deserves. And sure, that's life, but it's still a pretty sad place to leave Happy at the end of this movie. When it comes to the villains in No Way Home, the majority are given ample space to explore their psyches and work through some of their trauma. However, the attention is largely skewed towards Sam Raimi's set of villains. Whereas Green Goblin and Doc Ock truly work to become better people, we miss out on those nuances with the Lizard and Electro from the Amazing Spider-Man series. Granted, both the Amazing Spider-Man villains are developed far more in their original films than Raimi's set, but fans would still like to see more from them in No Way Home. The Lizard and Electro are opposed to Tom Holland's Peter helping them, but they have no choice in the end. All 3 Peters force them into a cure, which isn't a great message when helping people is the tagline. Then, with little build-up, everyone is happy to be back to normal. The movie does what it can with its time, but it would be nice to see a bit more depth from the Amazing Spider-Man crew and even Raimi's Sandman. We get one great moment with Electro when he remarks his surprise that Spider-Man isn't black, but hopes that there is a universe where he is. Of course, Spidey fans know that this is a shout-out to Miles Morales, who recently appeared in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Okay, we get it. Tony Stark was responsible for some pretty incredible technological advances during his time at Stark Industries. Of course, that unbridled power would attract villains. However, some things are sacred, like Tony's arc reactor.
That's because it's a miniaturized arc reactor.
It makes sense that MCU creators want to keep Iron Man's legacy alive in new projects. But there are other ways to accomplish that without insulting his memory. When Electro uses Tony's arc reactor, it's hard not to take the dastardly use of Iron Man's most iconic piece of tech personally. His arc reactor is what kept the MCU's first superhero alive, and post-mortem, it would be nice if he could retire that particular piece of superhero history rather than corrupting and distorting its purpose so long after Tony's death. Iron Man's memory deserves more than being a tool for villains to take advantage of. Let the man rest in peace. Doctor Strange may be a pro at chaotic spell work with unintended consequences, but his botched jobs in No Way Home takes the cake. Sure, we need a catalyst for the multiverse villains to appear in this world, but even for Strange, this is a lot. When Peter continually tries to intervene during Strange's spell, it becomes horribly unstable and blows up in both of their faces. But at the end of the day, Strange is an adult with more than enough experience to know better than to let Peter meddle with his spells. He caters to Peter's whims multiple times until Peter himself changes the incantation, but it should never get that far. Strange blames Peter for the bungled spell work, but look who his role model is.
We started getting some visitors.
Even worse, more than a few plot holes emerge regarding Strange's clumsy magic wielding when all is said and done. Yet the worst of it comes at the end of the film, when Peter asks Strange to do a spell to make everyone forget that he's Spider-Man. Even Michelle and Ned. However, it doesn't just make them forget Spidey's identity. They don't remember Peter at all. Even students he's gone to school with for years who knew Peter before his Spidey identity forgot him. All in all, it's frustrating to end a trilogy with more questions than answers. With the completely trusting partnership Tom Holland's Peter has cultivated in his own MJ, it's disheartening when he takes away her autonomy over their relationship. Michelle knows the risks of being Spider-Man's girlfriend, and she's more than capable of holding her own. But once everyone's memory of Peter goes away with Strange's spell, he decides that she should live her life without him. Peter made a promise to Michelle before the spell that he would find her and tell her everything that happened so they could work on rebuilding their relationship. Instead, he pockets his speech and walks away, taking her choice away from her, which is undeniably heartbreaking and cruel. Taking 3 Peters from Spider-Man universes hailing from different decades could have ended in disaster. Still, writers Eric Sommers and Chris McKenna seamlessly pull it off alongside director John Watts, and of course the web-slinging actors themselves. Without missing a beat, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield dusted off their cobwebs and delivered heartfelt performances with their usual dash of humor and one-liners. Fans can even argue that their respective cameos are even better than their original roles. These cameos could have been shallow and fleeting, but instead they each have meaningful character arcs in their quest to help the next generation Spider-Man. And that credit goes to everyone who worked on the project. It would have been such a letdown to see the OGs come back for a frivolous minute or two. But we get to know this older iteration of our heroes, and it's a gift. Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker spends a good part of the franchise struggling with his thirst for vengeance. Between his quest to find and kill Uncle Ben's killer to being somewhat responsible for Norman Osborn's death, quite a few people have died at the hands of our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Turns out it was really Sandman who shot Uncle Ben, but whatever. Spider Revenge! In No Way Home, we see Tom Holland's Spider-Man grapple with a similar mission to even the score after Green Goblin kills Aunt May. However, Maguire's Peter can't stand the idea of watching another Peter go down this dark path, and stops him from becoming a cold-blooded killer. The moment our 2002 Peter Parker convinces Peter to spare Norman, he hands the baton to Holland, allowing a new generation to take it from here. Watching Maguire's Peter get some closure and peace through helping a younger version of himself is a beautiful moment that mends some of his old scars. One of the biggest flaws superhero films fall into, even in modern times, is making its women helpless damsels who need saving every 5 minutes. However, in No Way Home, Michelle and Peter save each other on countless occasions in an equal partnership. The update on the usual trope is a refreshing signal that times are changing, and so must our superheroes. Everyone needs help sometimes, and it's nice to see Peter accept assistance from someone he loves instead of pushing it away. If you're going to have a woman by your side when you're fighting crimes and taking names, Michelle Jones is the best out there. And she's not afraid to call Peter out when he needs it either.
What are you hiding, Peter?
When you grow up with the Avengers, it's easy to get into a mentality that every problem needs solving via magic or a heavy-duty piece of Stark Industries tech. However, the MCU's Peter Parker is still a teenager with typical human issues, like not getting into college. Sure, the reason he doesn't get into MIT is rooted in the fact that he spent the last years of his life running around as Spider-Man. Still, before trying to magically whammy the world with an amnesia spell, Peter really should have contacted the school to explain his position. Once Dr. Strange calls him out on the serious lack of critical thinking, Peter does find someone at MIT he can plead his case to. Using his typical charm, he wins her over. Doc Ock is one of Spider-Man's most fleshed-out foes when it comes to the OG Spider-Man trilogy. His journey has 3 parts: Doc's initial introduction, his villainous descent, and ultimately reclaiming his kind-hearted nature and defeating himself. No Way Home expands on his already developed arc and makes it even better by bringing fans more of Ock's humanity. No Way Home allows him to truly become the hero and save his fellow villains in the process. Many of Spider-Man's villains deserve much more space to explore their humanity and villainhood than the original films allowed. This is most definitely true of the first film's Green Goblin. Even before Norman turns into the Goblin, he isn't winning any Father of the Year awards. The villain barely grapples with his humanity even when he's fighting off his evil alter ego, and it's hard to root for the guy when he has so little substance. No Way Home corrects that by giving Norman proper space to make better choices and access his humanity. Both villains get concrete storylines that correct some of the superficiality in the OGs. Gwen Stacy's death in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is one of the most gripping and heartbreaking scenes in any of the Spidey films released before No Way Home. Many fans don't give Garfield the credit his Spider-Man deserves, but he nails this moment and its 2.0 counterpart in No Way Home. When Michelle falls off the Statue of Liberty in an identical way to Gwen, it's not her own Peter who saves her, but Garfield's. Setting aside his own trauma, he leaps into action and catches Michelle, to spare this universe's Peter from going through the same eternal grief and guilt he did. No Way Home gives Garfield's Peter the nuanced and deep ending he's always deserved. It's clear that Peter hasn't moved on from what happened to Gwen, and saving Michelle gives him the closure he needs to move on with his life and start living it fully again. Fans of Andrew Garfield's take on Spider-Man couldn't be more grateful. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about Spider-Man No Way Home are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.